Imagine a world where Europe had no shield against aggression, where the threat of war loomed over every city, and where the very freedoms we take for granted were at risk of disappearing overnight. Imagine if there were no NATO, no alliance to deter attacks, no coordinated defense, no guarantee that small nations would survive hostile powers. What would the world look like today? Would the Cold War have escalated into a full-scale nuclear conflict? Would Europe have fallen under Soviet domination? Could democracy itself have been at risk? In this video, we're diving deep into a world that almost could have been, but never was. Buckle up, because the reality might shock you. Number 8. A Europe on the brink of chaos. After World War II, Europe was exhausted. Cities lay in ruins, economies shattered, and political systems fragile. NATO wasn't just an alliance, it was a lifeline. Without it, Western Europe would have been on its own, with each country scrambling to protect itself against both internal instability and external threats. Imagine France negotiating bilaterally with Germany while worrying about the Soviet Union's ambitions in Eastern Europe. Italy, politically divided, might have faced internal collapse or outside pressure from larger powers. Countries like Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, tiny, open to invasion, with little military power, would have been extremely vulnerable. In a NATO-less Europe, fear would dictate policy. Nations might have stockpiled weapons, built walls along borders, or even considered preemptive strikes to ensure survival. Alliances would be fragile and temporary, with little coordination. The result? A Europe always on edge, teetering on the brink of chaos. Number 7. The Cold War could have turned hot. During the Cold War, NATO acted as a powerful deterrent. The Soviet Union knew that any attack on Western Europe would trigger a response from the United States, Britain, and other NATO members. But without NATO, this balance of power would not have existed. Berlin might have been permanently occupied by the Soviets in the 1950s. Hungary in 1956, or Czechoslovakia in 1968, could have seen full-scale war rather than just localized uprisings. The Cuban Missile Crisis, already the closest humanity has come to nuclear war, could have escalated even faster if NATO weren't there to signal a united Western front. Every skirmish, every border dispute in Europe could have been the spark for a larger conflict. The Soviet Union, sensing weakness and disunity, might have been far more aggressive. Europe could have been a continent perpetually on the edge of World War III, and the risk of nuclear escalation would have been dramatically higher. Number 6. The U.S. would be pulled deeper into Europe. Without NATO's collective defense framework, the United States would have faced impossible decisions. Every conflict in Europe would have required independent intervention. There would be no automatic all-for-one defense. Every battle could have been a solo fight for Washington. Imagine American troops stationed permanently across multiple European countries, with each nation calling for protection. The logistical nightmare alone, coordinating supplies, command structures, and diplomacy, would have been enormous. America could have been drawn into wars it didn't want, spending trillions in foreign conflicts, while risking tens of thousands of soldiers' lives. NATO allowed the U.S. to project power efficiently and strategically, with allies sharing the burden. Without it, America might have been overstretched, vulnerable at home, and hesitant to intervene in crises elsewhere in the world. Global geopolitics could have been very different. Number 5. The Soviet Union could have grown stronger. Without a united Western front, the Soviet Union might have expanded unchecked. Eastern Europe could have been absorbed faster, while smaller Western nations too weak to resist would have faced intense pressure to negotiate or surrender. Countries like Austria, Denmark, or even parts of Germany might have fallen into Soviet influence without the fear of NATO retaliation. Communist ideology could have spread deeper into Europe, potentially influencing Italy, France, or even Spain, changing the entire political map. Imagine a Europe dominated by Moscow, where free elections were rare, dissent was dangerous, and life was dictated by authoritarian regimes. NATO wasn't just military, it was a political shield for democracy. Without it, the Soviet sphere of influence could have extended far beyond what history actually allowed. Number 4. No standardized military cooperation. One of NATO's lesser-known but vital roles was military standardization. It ensured that armies could fight together efficiently using compatible weapons, tactics, and communication systems. Without this, every European country would have operated in isolation. During a war scenario, this could have been catastrophic. Imagine joint operations failing because French tanks couldn't communicate with Belgian artillery. Intelligence sharing would be slower and unreliable. Quick responses to invasions would be nearly impossible. NATO's ability to coordinate armies, navies, and air forces made Europe stronger collectively. Without it, fragmentation and inefficiency would have made every country vulnerable, increasing the likelihood that a well-prepared aggressor could conquer territories before help could arrive. Number 3. Smaller countries would be at greater risk. Countries like Norway, the Baltics, or Belgium often rely on NATO for their very survival. Alone, they are small, strategically vulnerable, and unable to withstand a major power's aggression. Without NATO's umbrella, these countries might have been forced into compromises, territorial concessions, authoritarian treaties, or alliances with less than trustworthy neighbors. Some nations could have been absorbed or dominated, while others might have become failed states. Even countries that survived would live under constant threat. Borders would be militarized, citizens would be trained for war from childhood, and national economies would prioritize defense over growth. The Europe we know, prosperous, free, and interconnected, might have never existed. Number 2. Global conflicts could escalate faster. NATO's influence didn't stop at Europe. By containing Soviet expansion and stabilizing Europe, NATO allowed the rest of the world to develop without the constant fear of escalation. Without it, local disputes in Asia, Africa, or the Middle East could have dragged Europe into conflicts, escalating small wars into global crises. Korea, Vietnam, or even Middle Eastern conflicts could have seen NATO countries intervening individually, risking nuclear escalation. Every border dispute or rebellion would have carried global stakes, and humanity would live in a world where every crisis had the potential to spiral out of control. The absence of NATO could have made the 20th century far more violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. Number 1. Democracy might have been in jeopardy. Finally, NATO's existence was about defending more than just borders. It was about defending values. Democracy, human rights, and freedom flourished in Europe because countries could rely on a united defense system. Without NATO, authoritarian ideologies could have gained strength. Countries might have tilted toward dictatorships under pressure, fearing invasion or internal chaos. Elections might have been suppressed, civil liberties curtailed, and dissent punished. The Europe we know today, united, democratic, and thriving, might have looked very different. A fragmented continent under constant threat, with freedoms eroded and citizens living in fear. NATO's role in protecting democracy is as important as its role in defending borders. So, what would a world without NATO look like? A Europe on the brink of chaos, a Cold War that could have turned nuclear, a stronger Soviet Union, more global wars, smaller countries at risk, and democracy itself threatened. The reality is chilling. NATO didn't just prevent wars, it shaped the modern world. And without it, the freedoms, stability, and safety we often take for granted might have been impossible. If this glimpse into an alternate history fascinated you, make sure to like and subscribe, because our next video will explore even more what-ifs that could have changed the course of history forever. Trust me, you don't want to miss it.